welcome and good evening to the 6th rendition of the double feature Thursday evening lecture series of Living the City. Living the City is an exhibition, a publication, and a program of events about cities, people, and stories. Unfortunately, we're not on Insta Live right now, but on our website, on Vimeo, and on Facebook. Tonight, I'm honored to have Matylda and María with us, two curators and many more joining our conversation. This is, for me, always a pleasure to have not only great people to talk to, but such a diverse range of professions as well. Last time we spoke to artists. This time we're talking to let's say, creative or artistic curators. The next time we have choreographers, and this is the whole idea of it. I will start to explain briefly the setup for Thursday evening. We'll be together for about 45 to 60 minutes. I'll introduce both of the speakers, and each one of them will, I don't know, talk for about 10 to 20 minutes. Then we have a bit of a questions. If you have questions, actually now we're not on Insta, so I don't know if you how you could ask questions. So I have to do the asking, and then at the end we'll join a conversation, the three of us. And I will start to introduce you, Matylda. I was just thinking, we met, is it a year or 1.5 years ago here in Berlin?
About 1.5 years, yeah.
So about 1.5 years ago, I met Matylda at an event. We, I think, immediately connected and have been in let's say, continuous exchange of ideas ever since, in manifold ways. You struck me from the very first moment as very open and very opinionated about many things, extremely curious and kind of striving to the city and like literally seeing and doing everything that can be done in the city. You are in many ways, I think we share a lot of similarities in our, let's say, unorthodox curatorial approach that we have. You are a curator, you are a designer, you also call yourself a scenographer, which I really like. So there's a lot of attention paid to how the, let's say, the curatorial formats are being displayed, how they kind of show in space. And you focus on, or very often on collaborative and performative projects, and both in physical as well as in virtual or digital space. That's, I think, one of the many kind of red threads that run through your work. The other one is that of a very transdisciplinary approach, and all of the different formats that you're using, they appear almost as tools for you, as experimental tools, whether this is now an exhibition or whether it's a talk or whether it's a choreography or a scenography or an art direction. But there's always the moment of experimentation in all of these works. Currently,
it's a continuous test.
It's a continuous test. It's a continuous test, and it seems a continuous experiment where you're not testing only the subject that you're investigating or the artists or designers that you're working with, but the whole system in itself. You recently opened an exhibition that you curated together with Damien Fopp at in Zurich, Museum für Gestaltung, called Total Space. Maybe we can talk about this after your presentation, already during your presentation. You are co-founder and you've been artistic director of the Depot Basel from 2011 to 2017. You also initiated the curatorial initiative, Foreign Legion, together with Vera Sacchetti, I think is how you pronounce it, and many more things. You're also teaching. You taught in Kiel at the Mutesio School, you taught at the School of Arts in Chicago, and all over the place. So that said, this is the introduction for you, and thank you for being here with us, and the screen is yours.
I don't even really know what to add to it. You actually done my presentation already. But yeah, I will share my, I will maybe add to it a little bit, because when María and I spoke about this co-presentation, we really talked about, different methodologies that we also both have in common, because we are sharing the screen and the space together today. And one interesting thing is that we're both New Berliners in a way. I'm born in Świebodzice in Poland, and I've been a foreigner my whole life. I'm even here, being in Berlin, I'm a foreigner. So that brings also, you know, a different perspective to culture production, and also who you are as a, you know, an artist, a designer, as a curator, or as a person who kind of, I don't know, is an accomplice in the production of culture in a city, you know. And in that sense, Berlin is new to me. But I give you a little bit backstory on to the things that I'm interested in. By sharing my screen with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the whole thing, the technical problem that I had before is reoccurring. Here we go. I wanted to tell you, I wanted to start with a story about this book that was given to me by Huub Haya van der Werf, the former artistic director of the Jan van Eyck Academy, that I also was a participant in. And the book is called The So-Called Utopia of a Sonderburg. It's basically a found book by an author called Albert Meister that the Swiss-Swedish artist Luca Frey found. And he really talks in this book about, you know, when the Centre Pompidou was built, and it was built in Beaubourg, in a former, you know, working arts or, you know, working class environment. So the question is also, how does, you know, a space becomes a place by putting this kind of multiplex cultural institution there. And here in the section, you see something really interesting that is tackled in this book is, you know, like that the visibility of the Centre Pompidou above, but then in the section you see a space that looks like an underground or like a parallel world to the visible culture in connection to the invisible culture. And he really talks about the 70s or the late 70s and how this institution was built and which ambition was behind this institution. And there's a quote that I want to read out from that publication that very much speaks to my whole practice. Something that is at the heart of the new culture is love, availability, the rediscovery of the other as a human being, not as an instrument or occupying a specific social role. We are desperately obsessed with changing structures, with breaking molds, but we don't want to understand that it's necessary that we crush our rigidity first, destroy all that has been stuffed into us like respect for authority and the thirst for power over others before destroying the external hierarchies. Otherwise, we end up, as it has happened before and is still happening, building them anew. And it responds to me because, you know, every institution that is built today reproduces the wrong structures that were built before. And in this publication specifically, I like how this, you know, first person narrator really walks you through all the spaces, all the roles, all the structures needed to build, and also talks very much about money and all the themes that the cultural institutions should address. And one other thing that I want to read out is what is written actually in the entry. It says, oh no, I cannot read my own. I cannot read my own handwriting. Can you manage it? Okay. But I have it also in the digital form, of course, because I work between the digital and the physical world. So in the entrance, it says, the starting point of every search for a new culture is to leave it in the hands of the interested. And that's basically what my practice is about. And as you already said, Lucas, I was very lucky that in 2011, I got connected to a group of people that were based in Switzerland and Basel. And initially we wanted, or we had this intention to maybe make an exhibition project. But as a team, we were positioned we came from so many different types of fields that together as a team, it totally made sense to write a concept for that kind of new typology of an institution that is not an institution yet, but also becomes a space and a place in the same time. So this is an old grain silo that we facilitated in the beginning, and in total we worked for about 7 years together, and that's how it very much looked like. You know, we work with people, we work with attitudes, with profiles, with artistic profiles, but also, you know, very local profiles. We were a team of 5, but we really worked not very much. I mean, we were a place for contemporary design, but we worked with themes that, I don't know, dealt from work to money, to precarious work, to relationships, to collectives, to, you know, built environment and the production of the challenges of the current production, you know, the state of production, of the challenges that you encounter when you want to produce work or when you want to produce for the world that you're in today. But you know how it is. You work for 7 years, you have a collective dream, but eventually the collective dream maybe dies by, you know, lack of communication, lack of resources, lack of structures. So for me, it was interesting how after I've been constantly moving or recontextualizing things, I didn't have a space anymore. And Damn magazine back then wrote this article that was called No Space is a Good Place. And I loved that title because I thought, yeah, maybe that's the future of an institution, that you reactivate, you're not in the structures that reproduces everything, but you look for locations, and then, you know, given the right time and the right circumstances, you produce culture. You know, how about that? But then back then I was invited by Chus Martinez from the Institute Kunst to join a lecture, and I don't like PowerPoint presentations. You know that. I like using my screen as much as a space, you know. So I came up with this format that is called desktop exhibition, and I mean I could cross-reference maybe Marcel Duchamp's, you know, Boîte à valise. This is a work, I don't know, from the 50s maybe, where he would reproduce all his work as a miniature and put it in a little box, you know, like a little suitcase, and would carry it around. But he was only representing himself. But what I do as a curator, as a host, as a performer, as an artist, or whatever you want to call it, I represent the work of others. So I treat my surface, my desktop surface, by putting things that we know from the real world, from the physical world. And in this case, as you can see in the picture, I have shelves on my desk where I put all these things, ideas, and the work of others onto it. And then I use, you know, like a projector to project it for other people, and walk them through an exhibition space by them not having to move, but me speaking by opening, or, you know, shortcut style, opening and closing files. So this is a little bit like the, you know, how circumstances would kind of look like. But I have, in the last 3-4 years, I've done, I think, about, I don't know, 25 desktop exhibitions in different circumstances, in different themes, in different locations. Yeah, so basically, as you already said, I'm interested in the physical and the digital space. And in this moment when Damian Fopp, who is a new curator at the Museum für Gestaltung, approached me and he asked me if I would be interested in working on a show with him, we really spoke about this, you know, this connection between the digital and physical space, but also how it would look like if you would not, you know, like how you would make immersive spaces where you walk through the work, but you don't look at it only, you know, so you experience it physically, and how the built environment that is built for the institutional space would affect you as a visitor. So, and back then, one of the students said that they are interested in working in total environments. So we took the term, and we really also thought very much about the Gesamtkunstwerk by Richard Wagner. And we took the term and we said that we want to commission and work with these 5 studios, and specifically studios from all over the world. We have 2 Swiss studios and 3 international studios there, to develop something like, you know, where we address total space. It's a completely non-linear exhibition because you can walk in from both sides. And this is obviously only an illustration from the center space that is a so-called Wikipedia article, which you can see here. So we also thought, you know, what does it mean to write a curatorial text and position it in the exhibition, in the entry space? What does it mean if a visitor walks in and sees the first total spaces, experience them physically and visually, and maybe also has, you know, like an auditive experience, but then only in the center of the exhibition, he or she walks in and sees an environment where text is also layouted as much as any kind of artistic or installative work. So we built this island in the middle, and we lay out this whole exhibition text as a Wikipedia article. We initially also wanted to publish it also online, but the museum was against it because they said we are the authors of a text and we cannot pretend that we didn't, like that someone else would publish it for us, you know. So we withdraw from that idea. Maybe we'll do it later, we will see. But just to give you an impression of how one of these total spaces look like. And it's also maybe interesting because I'm also very much interested in, you know, the work that has never been produced before. And in this case, it's Trix and Robert Hausmann. It's an elderly couple from Switzerland. They're both in the 80s. It's maybe seriously one of the last works that we will ever see from them. And they were romanticizing always about Leonardo da Vinci's octagon that he drew. But back then, he didn't have access to mirrors that size. So they constantly, whenever I would meet them, they would talk about this kind of idea. And then Damien Fopp and I decided that one of his total spaces would be the octagon that they imagined to be. So that was during the opening. That was not really opening, but a gathering between a bunch of people. And I'm finishing with this picture because one of the main interests that I recently developed is I'm very much interested in intergenerational work. Specifically working with either children or very, you know, old practitioners, because I have a feeling that there's so much to find and look. And also I really like how children and old people, how they communicate. It's like they don't need words, you know, and I find it fascinating. As much as, you know, like the idea with total space, it was also the idea of withdrawing from language in order for people to experience the space. And I think I would like to finish with this last thing and say thank you.
Yeah, thanks to you, Matylda. Maybe we can directly continue talking a little bit more about the Total Space exhibition.
Sure.
You showed now basically just 2 pictures, but there's many more. So I can really recommend everyone to kind of go on your website and take a look at the exhibition or at the Museum für Gestaltung in Zurich. But let's pick up on this idea of the immersive space, apart from the fact that obviously right now under Corona conditions, this is something that we would all wish for, but can't. No? Our exhibition is currently closed.
Not in Switzerland.
Say that?
Not the exhibition is still open.
Yeah, in Switzerland it's still open, but from a curatorial point of view, it's something that I'm curious to hear a little bit more from you when that moment came that you realized how important the space actually is. I'm asking this question against the backdrop of my own experience. I started making books first, and then from making books, I was eventually asked to do exhibitions. I would say the first 3 to 4 exhibitions, I basically made books in a space. I mean, it was nothing more than that until I realized, wait, I'm missing out on the most important point here. I'm in a space, it's a different medium. I can use it in a completely different way than I would do it with a book. No? Mm-hmm. But could you elaborate a little bit on your kind of curatorial path towards understanding the importance of space?
I mean, the thing is that I never wanted to be a curator, but I was a student, and I was fascinated by Carsten Födinger's work that has so much to do with, you know, physicality and building site material and the power and the, you know, like the energy that the work had. And I remember as a student, I called him and I gave him 120 euros and said, Carsten, I want to do this exhibition in my living room. I'm gonna clean it all up, and you're gonna come hang out with me for 5 days. I give you 120 euros, and we did that, you know. And he is now represented by, you know, Nicholas Krupp in Basel, and in his CV, I'm still the first person that curated a show in my living room. That I think, I mean, probably 15 friends of mine saw in my living room, and I was naive and I'm mostly a host than anything else, and I'm interested in hosting people. I like kind of the interaction between people. That's why, ironically, I really never made a book. I'm super intrigued by the possibility of making a book, because for me it's a designed object, you know, and I've wrote concepts and I mean secretly co-edited things or help people to make concepts out of it, because I'm naturally also an art director, you know, and and I like to envision things, how they look like and how they are communicated. But I like the physicality of things because it's the possibility of people to encounter. But in this case, with this exhibition with Total Space, it's interesting because we shifted from this idea of physicality in space to the how can we address this epidemic also at the same time. So we did choose, and randomly I have obviously an invitation from Total Space with me. We decided to, like it's almost like a provocation, because we know we have this finger here that is basically this kind of, hand sanitized, like strictly clean hand. So the exhibition is entirely built from scratch. So there is technically no exhibit, everything can be touched, but it's a provocation in the sense that in this extreme times that we're in, this exhibition is an exception to the rules that we applied, and we had to use this color, for example, that it's a Pantone color, that it's actually called serenity, because we do want people to develop a new serenity, like a neue Gelassenheit, because that's what we need at the end, because it's not about living without Corona, it's living with it and how to deal with it. So maybe this exhibition is the possibility to explore that kind of physicality in that sense and see, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not even sure if I'm really answering your question, but I think, yeah, I don't know.
I have a few more questions, but maybe we can put them towards the end for you, and start with María now. But maybe the new serenity, if I'm not completely wrong, this also connects to the last issue of the Arts of the Working Class. So maybe you just created a nice bridge there for us to.
One of the many bridges that unite us.
That's true. There's many that connect all of us. But just with the term that you just dropped, brings us to the latest issue of the Arts of the Working Class, and maybe it gives me a chance to introduce María, and then I'll try to ask a few more questions to both of you, because there's many other things that I'm interested in your work, and Matylda, also the kind of introspective position that you're trying to take, or that's how you formulate it, but we come to that. María, so now to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us, María Inés Plaza Lazo. I thought, okay, when did we meet? And this is really funny and very full circle in the Living the City context. So the beginning of this year, I was at Akin Bode's opening at the Martin Gropiusbau, and there was the after party, and I was there actually with Ahmet Özgüt. Akin Bode Akin Bey was the first lecturer here in our Thursday evening series, together with Emeka Okereke, and Ahmet is one of the participating artists and also gave a talk. In any case, I was standing with Ahmet and he introduced me to you, and that's how we met, and it's nice that you're now joining us, and in particular with a special connection also to Matylda. I said before, you are a curator as well, and an art critic. Your background is in art history, as I understand. You studied in Munich art history. You have worked in Munich, also created a festival in public space, art in public space, 4 years ago in 2016, but you are also founder, together with Paul Sochacki and Alina Kolar.
Alina Kolar, yeah.
Thank you. Of the street journal Arts of the Working Class.
You're going to send him to a pronunciation course for Polish surnames.
For sure, actually, I think I skipped yours in the beginning, so this is
it's fine.
I sneaked through this one.
We should be allowed to be in between languages.
Yes.
English is not the only one, and but yeah.
So anyway, so Arts of the Working Class. This is one of your kind of main projects now since a couple of years, and a magazine that is published every 2 months, and has contributions by a very broad field of practitioners, from creatives and artists, but also thinkers and theoreticians. It's always comes in different languages as well. And I guess the name Arts of the Working Class you will elaborate a little bit on, but very generally speaking, you're trying to say it belongs to everyone. It belongs not to like a high class, but to the whole society. Something that we share in our approach that we had for Living the City as well. And this said, María, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Lucas. And thank you also, Matylda, who also was also one of the motors to bring us together tonight, as we spent a lot of time together this year. Thanks to Corona, we came also very close and ended up working together as well. We invited Matylda right away to have a column in our paper called Things Might, to give also this non-linear but also non-objective way to relating to things, which is interesting to the non-spatial articulation of space in your exhibition, Matylda. Which brings me also to the non-publication, the radical idea that we represent with a street newspaper that is published bi-monthly in many languages at the same time. So I would like to start also coming back to my background, maybe not because I'm trained as an art historian, but I've been, the moment I left the academic realm, I decided that I want to devote my energy and time to visual care, and this visual care has to be on the streets. So it's not coincidental that my first editorial venture was an online platform called Reflector M, and Reflector M had already, it was inherent to the idea of being an expert in Germany, since I landed in Munich, but I grew up and learned of social lives and society in Ecuador, in Guayaquil, where I come from. So being an expert in Munich, which is already a very strict city with very strict structures, brought me to the very challenging, this fireproof situation that we've been coping with, the idea of how to experiment on a curatorial level, for which the curatorial is facing the need and the big question of how do we relate to the world beyond an elitist idea, a very bourgeois idea of culture that cannot be sustainable anymore. And in the post-pandemic situation or pandemic situation we're living right now, this is basically also having an ideological turn in which people have to organize differently, and where everything, at least from the cultural sector, where everything has had already the status of being the synonym of precarious, of the precarious, has to turn this upside down. And this was letztendlich, apropos being in between the languages, one of the main ideas that brought the paper to life. I landed in Berlin 3 years ago without a job and without any kind of link to a professional life that I could build in the city, and knowing that the city is so full of brilliant minds and artists and intellectuals and lots of people from around the world. The question, what do I give the city, was always in the back of my head when I started working for an experimental gallery space called Exile for a symbolic fee, and I was taking the metro there, and somebody selling mods in the wagon I'm sitting. So I gave him my last change, and I started going through the paper, and I realized it's so boring. Not even the vendors must be interested in what I'm here as a listening or like reading here, because it perpetuates the idea that if you're a vendor, if you're a homeless person, the only topics that are interesting for you will be the misery that surrounds you, that the only things that you're interested in is in the hotline to see where you can live. But honestly, if you take a deep look into how people operate and self-organize themselves on the streets, the reality is something different. So also not diminishing the fact that Mods, one of the oldest magazines of street newspapers from Berlin, has done an incredible job since the 90s, a bit earlier even. The idea of what to bring as a publication, what is the meaning or what's the sense, what kind of exchanges are possible, were brought to light with Paul, where we decided to build this on the frame of an exhibition that we were doing together. So it was impossible to work with him on a curatorial base, since he paints his works in his mind, and these are materialized 1 week before the exhibition opens. So I proposed him to do a paper, and it happens that he already had an idea, and it was supposed to be called Art and Critique of the Working Class. And the title was already tricky for me. I thought he was just joking, and that the kind of provocation, the veil of cynicism that it announces, it actually brings you to a certain level of self-reflection that I wasn't really confronted before. And it's a very long process, the unlearning.
Please. Maria?
Sorry, what?
Show us a picture, please.
Okay. Yeah, so I brought some, it's true, thank you. For the ones that don't know it, it looks like this. I'm not sure well, there you are, you're doing my job.
I know, hire me.
Let's see about that. Voila. So that's the first issue. The name was called The City is a Stateless Mind. And it already showed a kind of wordplay, so stateless as nationless, and on the other side, being a place that that is imploded in itself, just like Berlin, which faces this an extreme makeup, since the gentrification has literally swallowed it. So we already have these poetic names for the paper, and at the same time we also want to relate to the nature of the digital realm of spaces in which we also navigate and educate ourselves and communicate, which is basically online. So the headline works like this. It's not only resembling what is inside the paper, but it always relates to a certain, like a meme, to something bigger. Keiner hat Kontrolle über sein Leben was the first headline. And it already resembles these ambivalences as well. So I just don't know how to take off my the camera here, but you get the point. We have here up an article by Alina Kolar, who is the third head of this Trio Infernale as publishers, and she left her job in London, came to Berlin, and started with us this very unusual venture of having not only the articles and contributions to being together in a way of how associations work, but also in a way that advertisement communicates with the main the parting points of every single issue. For example, here next to Alina's text is an advertisement for Public Art Munich, perennial, that in 2018 was curated by Joanna Varsha in the city. So we asked her to have this advertisement being more experimental and not necessarily use the normal PR strategies to which every single institution is used to. It's not always possible, but it was already a way of dealing with the structures that we wanted to change. It's not only about institutional critique, but it's also dealing with the tools that we have at hand. And this is the picture that you see. It's in Palermo, where we presented the second issue, May the Bridges I Burn Light the Way, that we presented as an official collateral event of the Manifesta biennial, where we had zero budget. If we've been always working with zero budget, but being sustained only with the curated advertisement that we bring, and having an exhibition in the marketplace, building up and down the exhibition with the artists that we invited to work there every day like any other worker. Yeah, so I'm very wary of time, so I'm just gonna flip over the further cities that we came in along with the paper, thanks to further collaborations with unions, just like the New Museum Union in New York, as well as with Festina Lente, which is an editorial house and a collective based in Quito. This is a picture rather from Guayaquil, my hometown, by Eduardo Jaime, which for another bridge to other cities here. So basically showing just pictures of of cities is the way how can we relate to the city in general and in its essence. So this is a picture of Skid Row, the neighborhood with 60,000 homeless people in LA, for which we produced the issue you can see here, which was the issue that came along with the first lockdown, to which we devoted a special edition on homelessness around the world and how it relates to every city. So the paper, after 2 years of distribution of self-organized vendors, has 5 different pickup stations in the city where every person can pick it up and sell it to keep 100% of the revenues. And I've heard that the best place where, or the most popular place where our vendors find not only buyers, but also people with to which they have conversations with around the paper and things, or through the paper, is Tempelhoferfeld. So that brings us back to the living the city. And I hope it's, yeah, another bridge for our further conversation here tonight.
Making bridges.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The bridge is burning.
No, thank you. I will make another connection. Thanks for the presentation to the both of you. Maybe we open this conversation and we, the 3 of us, speak. The connection that I make with Matylda's approach, and from a curatorial point of view, that namely of creating an immersive space. I guess what you're generally interested in as a curator, which you particularly try to do in the Total Space exhibition, also, let's say, dissolving the boundaries between many like binary opposites, whether it be the virtual and the real, is something that we have has been also our curatorial aim in the Living the City exhibition, to create something like, I think you called it actually a parallel world, Matylda, so that you enter an exhibition and you're not looking at a white cube and, you know, presentations of architecture of the city, but to create almost like an alternative world, a parallel world that you can immerse in, that people can get lost in. So this is the connection. You already want to add, Sydney, you want another bridge? Please go.
you have to think about where the term immersion comes from. It actually comes from the virtual world, you know. I mean, it's not something that in reality happened. You know, it's just taken from that, you know, from the virtual reality set that, you know, and that's where the term comes from. And I think it's interesting. Like the question is, how do people learn? How do they, you know, like absorb things? And, you know, like looking at Maria's presentation about all these cities and how this paper locally activated things in combination with the work, and then it was manifested actually at the end with a paper. It's important for people to experience something, you know, and I don't believe that the way people learn today or should learn today is by this kind of very simple didactic methodology of looking at an object and reading a description text and trying to connect both of them. I also, on the other hand, I really like the other side of a coin of making exhibits or props that show us an alternative. You know, that's how I teach, for example. I never work with my students based on this idea that they have to do something that in reality can be produced today, but I want them to think in the possibilities that are not there yet, you know? So it's basically like science fiction, or the idea of Frederik Pohl that really talks about, you know, in order to you know, like it's almost like the success of the invention of the car is only in success if you also envisioned the traffic jam, you know. So it's about the consequence in that sense. And I like to think about that as a methodology of the built environment, of people making decisions and always thinking also about the consequence. And just to link it back to total space, we've tested something that the exhibition is run until June 2021. We don't know what will bring yet, but the sad point for me is this exhibition is in Zurich and I'm in Berlin. So I'm actually really jealous that you, Lucas, for example, you are from Berlin, your exhibition is Berlin, and what kind of beautiful quality it has that you, as a, you know, author or responsible, you can be technically present in this exhibition every day. Of course, we have lockdown at the moment, so it's an exception, but I think I feel totally detached from it. So even the virtual world is not giving me the sensation of me being, that's maybe where it's actually right now hard for me to talk about outer space, because it feels like it's on the other side of the world, like, you know, a dimension that I cannot reach in that sense.
And but I think what unites nonetheless is the moment of experiencing an exhibition. So not just intellectually or visually, but actually experiencing as a space. And the connection that I think we have to your approach, María, is that of a very inclusive approach too. No? And you're creating a street journal. It's not a magazine that's that you find only in the bookshop, but it's actually on the streets. And the idea that it's topics that are from everyone for everyone, or bringing even more of what you would say like a highbrow kind of artistic kind of discourse to the level of you know, everyone in the streets. On top of it, the topics that you mentioned, the city as a stateless mind, there was this article by Alina called The Street as a Possibility. So it's also a magazine that kind of really deals with the environment that it's interacting with, namely the city, whether it's now Skid Row or whether it's in Palermo, or, and maybe you can elaborate on this one, you also collaborated now for the German contribution to the postponed Architecture Biennale. So there seems to be this kind of natural connection to the architectural debate. How come?
Well, it's definitely one approach. The way how we came together with Olaf Grabert and the studio of Arno Brandelhuber and all the network that works around the pavilion of architecture in Venice, it's a way that it's how architecture is already being discussed in a way that it's not only the discipline as such, and it's not only the buildings, but it's thank you, Matylda, but also that it's how to empower social relations. It's already a question that it's inherent to how we build cities, and how the paper comes along. It's already related to an idea that is that is deeply connected to how to enact this ownership for the future, which is one of the main axes of the films that Christopher Roth did with a network with countless experts and dilettantes from around the world, describing a future that we can relate upon the practices that are already being produced, in a way how to radicalize the democratic processes, how to radicalize the building process as such, how tenants can be empowered in another way. And these are discourses and movements that we are, of course, connected, not from the part of how we want to deal with integration by addressing it or embodying it with this kind of object that it's moving, that's dynamic in that sense, that's uncategorizable, but it's to bring this proximity to what is happening and what you're breathing, that while you're reading it, you will have the notion that you have this experience. It's relating you to what you read. So it doesn't have to be necessarily, oh, this poetic text or this academic or totally roughly in bad German or in bad English, or or maybe you have to ask your friends to explain you or translate you a text in Turkish, Hebrew, which should be, official languages in Germany, but are not. But we're in that direction. So 2038, which is the year that the pavilion people projected to be the moment that everything comes together, what we are already experiencing. It's not only about the question of architecture, but it's how we live together, which is also the baseline of the entire biennial in Venice. So whether it will happen on crowds or not, we serve the idea that such an exhibition cannot be only for a catalog for 200 people that costs 50 euros, but it should be something that it's either for free if you cannot afford it, or should be your currency to relate to a wealth that has been up until the year 2020 just deprived from you as an individual. So
of access.
Yeah, it's more the question of access and integration. It's which is a more urgent term to be reconditioned.
And actually, while you're talking, I was reading a quote that I have from your from your CV, Matylda, that kind of fits in an interesting way. I'm trying to make it fit, where you describe your work as introspective, as it explores and experiments with the inner mechanisms of design, art, and architecture. So introspective, exploring the inner mechanisms. We've learned with your work, what María just described is in a way also exploring these inner mechanism within the city, social relations, collective governance, property, architecture, material resources, etc. But on that, in that sense, introspective, as you described it, in looking at inner mechanisms, yet both of you are actually highly accessible. So it's this kind of introspective extrovertedness or an introspective accessibility almost that I would say characterizes both approaches. Now, on one hand, arts of the working class is subjects that are also kind of that are on a high intellectual level, yet they're also a street journal. They're in many languages, not in one, so they are accessible for many, yet also inaccessible for others. I would say that's the same that you are trying to do with your curatorial work. But looking at the time, I also remember that you guys wanted to ask some other questions to one another or react to my observation. Am I totally wrong with what I just stated, or is this correct, the connections I made there?
Well, I think you're certainly right about our radical openness. I mean, openness and radicality are standard candles to, I think, also the way how we interact with each other, I would say. So...
I mean, we have to maybe clarify one little tiny thing about this is that when you asked both us or approached us a few months ago, we thought that we will have a physical experience. And one thing that maybe María and I also have very much in common, even though we know each other literally since 11 months, is that we have a certain, we want to have a certain presence within the space when we work with people. It's not necessarily that we want it, but usually it automatically becomes our role as a host or as someone who feels responsible for everyone, because we're extremely interested in people and where they come from, what drives them or what motivates them. And we initially titled this talk series or this talk today or this double feature Feuerproben, because we wanted to do certain physical tests with an audience on the physical grounds of your exhibition, which is obviously really hard on the online space. So yes, it would have been nice to ask a few questions and activate the audience, because, you know, like I technically actually wanted to be a dancer when I was very little. So it meant to be something dancerish, performative, also with language, which we cannot conduct today. So we can either continue or we can ask you a question also, Lucas. What about that?
I mean, go for gold. But I mean, from our part, I'm very happy that both of you found the time now, even though there's not a performance, but kind of to join us, because of these kind of parallels that I see in kind of rethinking how to exhibit, also rethinking how to exhibit space, how to kind of talk about space.
Or enable space.
On enable space, experience space, on the one hand, and the other, how to create like a more of an open dialogue about the city, or like topics that relate to the city, or the everyday life that we live in with the magazine, which is like a very direct dialogue with the city, something that we also aim at with the exhibition and the publication and the program of events. So therefore, I'm always thrilled and thankful to kind of be getting more insights from you know.
Maybe can I add a question to all of you?
Yes, please. Maybe it can be the closing question.
It's a closing question. What comes next, María? What comes next for you in the context of arts and working class? Lucas, what comes next for you after leaving the city?
Yeah, it's a nice question. Yeah, let's have our host answer first.
Well, I mean, again, we're in this sad situation that the exhibition was only open for 1 month. We had 17,000 visitors, which is amazing for an exhibition about city development, no? And now it's closed. And well, I guess we're waiting for the political decision. Realistically speaking, it's not going to open up again. It was supposed to run until the end of December. We are currently working on making or showing the exhibition in other cities. This is the main aim for us. So this way we can continue this discourse and the dialogue. And that's with regards to living the city, the core focus, so that it hasn't. The life continues and maybe can be also brought to the cities that are being discussed and within living the city.
Do you know what the general plan is for Tempelhof?
No. Simple answer.
Okay.
Well, I would say the consequent step to take at the moment as one of the publishers of the street newspaper is to build a union for the ones that are most vulnerable, the ones that are unemployed or underpaid. So, and this is not a new idea. There are a lot of people trying to also go against this Lumpenproletariat, to which Marx was, putting aside the people in the margins that did not produce capital. But since cultural capital is being constantly produced in a way that it's just abusing from all of our energy, that is something that we've called as a project called the Union des Refusés, and there are workshops for this, to build the art workers commons this weekend. So, and what about you, Matylda?
I'm selling a lot of subscription, María. And buy art, yes, the working class.
Yeah, I think the next thing you're gonna do is I'm hiring you.
That's my future self.
But tell us about your next project.
I mean, realistically speaking, I just wrote a concept, and it's interesting because usually I make exhibition, but I wrote an exhibition, which is interesting because you have to imagine how people walk through a space, like writing a script for a movie, which was challenging, but also really rewarding in the same time. And it's actually for a space here in Berlin that someone bought, and actually that person likes it so much that potentially it could become a permanent museum. But we don't know, how the work goes, because it's not cultural, but it's private. On the other hand, I really would like to open a school, in a sense, at some educational kind of place, because I'm interested in education in general, because I think the fundamentals of everything of the world is based on education. But let's see how, and ideally at the moment in Berlin, but yeah. That's pretty much it.
Okay, you will have plenty of great teachers already waiting in line.
Are you already saying that you're in?
I'm in, Matylda.
Me too.
Wonderful.
So I would like, I think we're wrapping this up now. I would like to thank the both of you, Matylda Krzykowski, which I forgot to pronounce in the beginning correctly, María Inés Plaza Lazo, for joining us. My name is Lukas Feireis. I'm part of the curatorial team.
María, come to me.
Yeah, okay, no. Oh,
yeah, this was, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Let me finish my sentence, girl, but you move over to Matylda. Now I'd like to thank on behalf of the entire curatorial team of Living the City, that's Tatjana Schneider and the Green Isle. And here we are. So we're coming to this moment of last minute performance of having both of you together here. Thanks so much. Thank you so much to the audience for joining us tonight. Sorry that it didn't work on Insta. Technical problems will not end in 2020. But thanks to you all. Next week again, Thursday, 7 o'clock, this time with Franka Marlene Vogt, choreographer and dancer, and Niche, architects and art historians. Matylda and María, thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.